Excellent. So welcome to our series on how to be sovereign in your own land or your own country. And I have to say, this was my little idea and I'm pretty pleased and pretty excited about doing this one. It's just because it's honestly something I've been asked so often by people. Like, who here right now in the webinar is keen to get themselves sovereign and independent from the mandates, but really doesn't like the idea of moving offshore and just kind of getting out of Australia? You really overall prefer to stay here because you like the way of life here. Just type in the chat if that sounds like you. Yeah, okay. So it seems like a lot of people feel that way, which is good, because I'm a little bit that way myself. And it doesn't mean you don't have your backup plan. I think that's important, but it's very good to realize, although it's not easy, it is very possible to be this way. So what I'm not going to start by saying is giving you some spiel where I'll say it's all really easy and anyone can do it. The answer is that if anyone could do it, then everyone would be doing it. The answer is by those who are committed and willing to put the work in, put the time in, get the right mentoring, follow rules and systems, will be able to do it. It's that simple. That's why I said it's very possible. In a way, the solution is simple, but not easy, just because it does require hard work. It does require showing off or showing up, and it does require getting really high quality mentor. So who would say that sounds like them? Who, in other words, who really is willing to put the work in to do that? Just curious, who knows without any shadow of a doubt that you'll be like, I don't like where things are going and I will do whatever I have to do to make sure this system does not apply to me. Just type a Y if you really are like that, in that way inclined. Helen, I now understand, but I have to. Yeah, I like that. That's a good answer. I think that sometimes we move by inspiring, but most of the time we move by pain. That's my learning. I learned a lot of wisdom around health, and I'd love to say it was because I was smart, but the answer was actually because I wasn't smart. It was because I was pretty much determined to do my own thing, got in such a bad state of health, I realized that I really did have to do something about this and move to that next stage, so to speak. So anyway, on that note, let's get started and let's get on with this. So introduction to being sovereign in your own land. So first and foremost, we are an educational mentoring company. We don't give financial, tax or asset protection advice, nor do we actually honestly want to. This is all about self-empowerment and sovereignty. And then we work with others to provide the more specific advice. So this is very much about educating and empowering you to go ahead and do what you need to do. And if you do want specific advice, take the knowledge you learned from this webinar and engage experts to assist you. So the agenda that's going to happen in this series over the next 4 weeks. The first week, which is today, is going to be the introduction to being sovereign. Second week is robust asset protection strategies in Australia. The third one is creating income streams and a balanced portfolio. And the fourth one is putting together your sovereignty plan. And these are based on what we're finding that in our surveys and the questions that people most want to know. People most want to know how to protect their wealth and get through the reset. And they also want to know how to balance their portfolio and to create a lifestyle where they're not dependent on the system and its little quirks and mandates and pharmaceutical bullcrap that goes on. So I've got possible bonus week, and really that will depend on how keen people actually are, because the good news is it actually is very possible, although hard, to live in Australia and get pretty much a lot of the tax benefits offshore, 100% legally, nothing dodgy if you know what you're doing. And again, I will do that if enough people are showing up to the webinars and really engaged and want to continue that. So that will be a possible bonus week and something that I really like doing to help people acquire sovereignty over their taxes. So on that note, sovereignty is defined as this, and it's really good to think about the book, The Sovereign Individual, and what that actually talked about, how the world would move into a time of sovereignty where more and more these big, large nation governments that are kind of trying to do the same rules for millions of people will break down into much smaller governments, communities, and groups of people. So it will break down quite significantly. That was their prediction. And already I'm seeing changes in the world. My friend was telling me he went to a restaurant and there was a robot in WA going around serving food. And he said it was incredible. He said the robot was efficient, it was good. It meant that the restaurant said to him their staffing shortages were now solved because they just couldn't get staff, as many of them couldn't. They just now needed a waiter, a couple of people in the kitchen, and the robot did everything else for them. So it's just changed their way of life. And you've got things happening as well, like move towards self-driving cars, increase in digital currency. I recently engaged with some people over in Russia, and of course, just on a personal level, and was literally able to, and now most of them are using Bitcoin because of sanctions. So, there's a lot of changes happening, and the move towards the sovereign individual is inevitably happening. The reality is, though, is that all great civilization change is preceded by chaos and upheaval. And what's very interesting is when you actually go back over the last hundreds of years and look at great changes in civilization, like the Industrial Revolution, the Information Age advent, the Agrarian Age changing over, it was preceded by major upheavals, like in the world and society. So what we're seeing right now is major upheavals, but really there's nothing new under the sun, Electra says robot cleaner in Woolies last night. I mean, I passed through Singapore on the way to Thailand, Electra, and there were robots moving all through Singapore airport doing a magnificent job, cleaning everything up and vacuuming and cleaning and keeping the airport clean. And it was like, wow, you can see in about 5-10 years from now that if humans who are not willing to evolve and educate themselves and spiritually evolve and financially evolve are going to be left behind. In the Industrial Revolution, many were left behind and literally lost their jobs, were screaming about the fact that machines were taking over. Now it's just a normal way of life. So what's happening is inevitable. You just have to make sure you're adapting and you're becoming more empowered. If you're disempowered, if you're screaming, if you're protesting against it and trying to stop change, you will be a victim of change, as so many will be. So this is really the age of sovereign individual and becoming sovereign in your own land and mastering that. My mother once said to me, but she said, if you run from a problem, it will find you wherever you go. Someone who runs and blames a partner in a relationship usually ends up going into the next relationship and the same crap happens. And equally, if you don't solve your sovereignty issues in Australia right now, running to another country, I personally don't believe is going to sort an awful lot. So you've got to come to that point of actually being sovereign within yourself and being able to be your own empowerment. And certainly people who didn't make their own empowered sovereign choices around their health, many are paying a real price now with vaccination adverse reactions and all kinds of other stuff. So in terms of timing, seasons, and all that kind of stuff, I just can't put it any better than one of the richest, wisest men on the planet who hold movements, including the Masons, the Templars, based a lot of their teachings on, was King Solomon the Great. Write some of the most extraordinary writings, and I could just read these over and over again. So Ecclesiastes was the last book this guy ever wrote before he passed on, and the whole book is a life reflections, and he gives some extraordinary wisdom about how when he actually realized about his life, that everything that had been before has now come, is one of the things he says. He says there's a time for everything under the sun, and I taught that last week in our class for our members. He said that ultimately everything is meaningless unless and it's about experience, enjoying life, and living the mission you're here for. So this is a very, very good extract where he says 3 important things, really. One is whatever your hand finds to do, do with all your might, for there's nothing in the grave where you go. In other words, once you're gone, you're gone. When my partner Sammy died last year in November and literally turned my world upside down, the biggest gift that she gave me was realizing how literally any day could be our last and actually giving everything my best. And it's completely changed the way I approach life. I literally live every day now, and as if it's my last, I give it my best, and anything I'm in, whether it's a connection, and I enjoy every minute. Even recently, I connected with a girl. It didn't work out. And someone said, how do you feel? I said, I honestly just feel really grateful for the short time we had. It was fantastic. And I actually meant it. It wasn't just like a little love and light. I meant it. I really enjoyed every minute of it. And as I saw it, it was now ended. And this is what Solomon is saying, whether it's your business, whether it's your wealth, just do anything well. If you're going to be sovereign and live in Australia, do it well. If you're going to plan your taxes, invest your money, grow your wealth, do it well. And he then gives a very, very encouraging comment to those of you who question your intelligence, question your ability, think that you've maybe missed the boat, maybe think you left it too late. He says something that Abraham Lincoln found out, who at age 54 was a failure in life. Everything he'd ever tried had failed. He'd been rejected in marriage. His 9 attempts to get anywhere in government had gone nowhere. 10 years later, this man had changed America and slavery. His time came. And it says here, but I returned and saw that the race is not to the swift under the sun. In other words, not to those who are fast, to make things happen quickly, nor is it to the strong, those who are really like mentally strong, who can stand up against mandates, whatever else. Nor does bread or like provision come to only those who are smart and wise. Nor do riches only come to men or women who are super intelligent. Nor does favor come to people who are talented. But here's the key words: time and chance happens to all. We have times in our life when everything is absolutely shit. No matter what we do, nothing seems to work. Who here has had times in their life like that, or might even be going through it right now, where everything you've done has just gone to shit? Like who's been a little bit like that even the last few years? Just say a me, if that's you. My guess is it's probably a few of you who have kind of been in that not so great a time. Yeah, rough couple of years. Who, by contrast, actually could say that right now, they know their time has come, but you actually feel like you're in a flow. Just write the word flow. If that's actually you, where you're like, you know you've hit your time and chance and you're going to take it. Yeah, a few of you saying flow. I certainly know that for me. Yep, a lot of you here. Because when the fact you've attracted to this webinar suggests that probably is the case. And when your time comes, you take it, you know. Many of these great, elite leaders who are now doing terrible things to the planet, once their time and chance came and they took it and they used it well. And now in their decline, rather than accept their decline, they're unfortunately doing some of the things they're doing. So it's just important to realize that time and chance and opportunity happens to all. And then he gives a final word of wisdom that would be well listened to. And I think if many had listened to this in 2020 and 2021, would have had a much easier time. He says, we don't actually know our time, as the fishes are taken in an evil net, and as the birds are caught in a trap, so the sons of men are taken captive in an evil time when it falls upon them suddenly. Many, when evil times come, when governments do stuff, when bad things happen, get taken captive because they're not ready for it and they don't see the warning signs. I noticed that I went through a bit of a period of culling after Sammy's death, and I knew I needed time out. I had to take quite a bit of time out. I went into a very dark place, and I did that deliberately. I chose to go into that spot and allow myself to decline. And as I told people, like a bear goes into hibernation in the winter, as do squirrels, and sleep all winter, I'm in the winter right now. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sleep all winter. And I just went into a hibernation. Haven't done as many webinars for quite a while, as many of you know. For that reason, I've been in a hibernation. But I feel like now spring is coming and I'm stepping out of my cave. It's a nice feeling. So the mandates the last few years have really affected society so much and left a lot of trauma. And this is a little bit of a dramatic line into what I'm about to say. But Judgment Day is here is, I think, a good way of summarizing it. In other words, what we're seeing now is we're going to see what I call the inevitable witch hunts that come from what you've seen. Because generally when things happen like what's happened, once it dies down, the witch hunts begin. And unfortunately, the witch hunt will be just as bad as as what we've seen in the last couple of years, is my prediction, because people who really probably should be left alone will get hunted down. They'll be blamed for every little thing that happened. And you've got to remember, in a stressful time like the last 2 years, there were people who did bad things. There were also people who seemed to do bad things, but really were caught up in the moment, were very stressed, and didn't really think through what they were doing and put in a difficult position. So it's really a good time to stay balanced and focused on getting yourself sovereign rather than getting caught up in what I call the witch hunts. That's probably one of my first comment to people. Because right now, the world is heading into a place where definitely the world is more open now, like traveling is as back to normal almost as you can get. And anyone who tells you to the contrary, it's just not true. I'm naturally very cautious. I've been traveling to Thailand. Right now, travel is by and large as back to normal as you can get, apart from the fact that flights are a lot more expensive because there's less flights and less staff. So mandates, of course, have really changed a lot of the world and broken down a lot of what we knew in our familiarity. And there's no question that the mandates, to me, have really just sped up what was already going to happen. I was saying for quite a few years ago, we were heading for worldwide economic collapse. We're always heading for something like that. A financial reset of some kind was always going to happen. There's there was always going to be a civilization collapse and breakdown. I mean, it's been getting predicted since the 1980s, 90s, 2000 that we were heading for that. The mandates have just like put things a little bit on steroids and sped things up. The mask mandates and things like that were just a kind of absurdity. And I will actually say, but I've noticed that people have woken up a little bit more over the last 2 years than they have previously. So, but keep in mind, Witch Hunt's Judgment Day is here next. It's the best thing that people can do right now is focus on your own sovereignty and really just, yeah, look, the best thing I would say to do is that if you want to travel again, go and do some travel now would be probably the first thing. Find out what else is around the world. It's amazing when I travel, finding out how much more awake people were than we thought, how much, you know, in Australia, we were very cushioned and very much kind of caught up in an absolute bunch of stupidity. And it's just a really good time to focus on getting sovereign and not getting caught up in these kind of things. And if you've taken the vaccine, rest assured there are actually remedies. There are people and homeopaths who can do that. If you haven't, well, yeah, look, just basically keep in mind, although there's still going to be various pressure, it's the biggest challenge now is to get yourself sovereign in income sense, a tax sense, because that's where I see things heading next. As reset happens, you can see then people who are dependent on the system are going to be really made vulnerable. So that's the important thing now, to get very, very independent. So being a sovereign and not a slave is how I would summarize it right now. And what the big difference between a sovereign and a slave is this. The slave relies on the system and other people to solve their problems. They operate from a place of disempowerment, where sovereigns take responsibility for their own lives and destiny and come from a place of self-empowerment. Now, that's a very general statement. Let's break this down a bit more specifically. So a slave, for example, relies on the system for their income, like whether it's a job or whatever else, or whether it's a contracting, or whether it's a license from the government, or whether it's something else, or some kind of import-export that requires them to travel. So slave is very heavily reliant on the system. The slave tends to kind of be, how I describe it, like the squirrel who doesn't build up any nuts over summer when things are good. They just celebrate, they eat nuts and get really fat, and then starve to death in winter because they can't get any nuts. The sovereign is a squirrel who, when things are really, really good, are heaping up plenty of nuts, storing things aside, are always seeing that winter will inevitably come. They're taking responsibility, they're being wise, they're saving, and then when the winter hits, they're ready for it well and truly, and they can take time out to reflect, to integrate, to rest, to hibernate until things improve again. So the slave, for example, will very much be attacking others and not taking action and expecting someone else to solve their problem. Sovereigns are very self-responsible. They will do the hard work. And believe you me, I'll give you an example. Some of you would have seen my, little pictures on Facebook. Some of you are my Facebook friends and would know that I've been having a wonderful little time right now, going around, literally a very, very, very impractical man. And I'm actually learning to become practical. And I'm actually doing things now like I've got a camper trailer. I'm learning to actually use it. I had one of my greatest successes beyond almost anything I've ever done in my life. And I successfully yesterday hitched a trailer and unhitched it and got it right first time. Now, I know that sounds funny, but those of you who know me, like Kristen Evans and a few others know, that is a very big thing for me, So in fact, I very excitedly posted on Facebook about how I finally did that, and then I kind of went ahead and, posted how a girl identifies as a cat, which I thought was extremely funny and very, very enjoyable. Jasmine's is a miracle. So if any of you want to identify as a cat, by all means, you now can in Melbourne. Here's another example of the witch hunt that's happening. Law firm releases bombshell legal opinion. So law firms are now openly coming out and saying what APRA did to doctors is illegal. I don't know if anyone else has actually seen that, but there's no question that the witch hunt is beginning right now. And what I call the slaves who gave up their power are now, screaming and kind of want revenge. This is what happens in the witch hunt whatsoever. So those of you who know me know I like to be a bit of a shit stirrer. JPC is, no idea why the 500% increase in athletes getting heart attacks, which literally has been happening over the last year. maybe they should exercise a little bit less. So yeah, those of you aren't my Facebook friends who want to have a little bit of a laugh and see my, shit stirring and a whole mixture of things, you can all do that sort of stuff. So yeah, my camper trailer, Bo, has been definitely a whole new challenge for me and showing me about the importance and teaching me about being sovereign and what it actually really means to be sovereign, so to speak. So here's another one. This is my camper trailer here right now. So yep, this is it here. In fact, I'll just play that there. So yep, you can see it there. It's pretty cool. It's actually got solar power. It's got everything to be completely self-sufficient. It's got I know you need 15 solar panels to actually be able to get enough power to be completely independent and operate off the grid. So I got 8 on the roof and I got myself another 8 panels in a separate section. So literally there's 16 solar panels on there, enough to be self-sufficient. It's got like everything from, as you can see, it's got a workstation. The advent of Starlink now means you can now get a portable satellite internet anywhere in Australia for a much cheaper price than you used to have to get. Starlink goes all the way up to Carnarvon in West Australia and up to, I can't remember, in New South Wales, but they reckon by the end of the year it'll be further, and by about March next year, it'll cover the whole of Australia. So it's going to enable you to be able to do it. So hopefully you can all see this. So yeah, that's the camper trailer anyway. So yeah, so look, basically the whole idea is to start getting your plan together and thinking about worst case scenarios. That's why I said to you, to be able to be sovereign in Australia, you really are going to have to cover a lot of scenarios. So this is just an example of showing you what I'm doing in real time. Why did I do that? I'm actually doing a survival course for a bushman who knows how to, heal snake bites and live off the land for 2 days on the 16th and 17th of September. Myself, Edward, and about 10 other people. And I'm doing that because I actually want to learn to survive and live off the land, one, for fun, but also having a really good survival skills. Because right now, let's be frank, most of us completely live in the city. We're dependent on the intelligence. We're dependent on the system. If the system is taken away from us, we're royally fucked. So I'm like, how can I live myself completely? So worst case scenario, we really do have an apocalypse and smart cities come in the worst possible scenario. I'm able to comfortably move off grid and live very simply if I have to without much problem. So that's my ultimate plan, to have that, be able to live in my own country. But at the same time, of course, I'm doing plenty of steps on the assumption I will continue to operate in the system, but on my own terms, like in the Matrix, and have the camper trailer and the other stuff as a bit of fun. And as a little bit, if things get a bit hairy for a few months, like the government suddenly go a bit crazy, I can just kind of move quietly away and go somewhere else until things settle. So that's what sovereigns do. The biggest difference between a sovereign and a slave that I've learned, my cousin told me this one, sovereigns will take the hard decisions. They won't blame anyone else for things that go wrong. If a relationship breaks up, they won't be blaming the woman. They'll be asking themselves, they'll be seeing it as a growth opportunity. Like, where did I go wrong? What can I learn from this? Where did I create this situation? The sovereign's the same when it comes to their taxes, to their finances, to everything. A sovereign would see the last 2 years as a real time of being able to reflect, being able to kind of work out your stuff and be able to grow a lot and learn to find your power. Many people, like for me, I found a lot more power the last 2 years. I learned to stand up on deeper levels than I'd even done before. I learned to let go more than I had before. I started taking more proactive steps around income and business than I had taken before. So it's a really good opportunity to do stuff when you actually do that, like a really good opportunity. So one of the things I like to teach people is this whole thing called the order of creation. And I'm sure some of you have seen me teach this before, but this is my whole foundation of life. And this one little diagram has been one of my biggest secrets to everything from standing up with governments on masks, vaccines, not getting caught in the tax system, not having to do the census, not having to vote when I wanted to. Absolutely, yeah, Jasmine, a game changer. So actually realizing that government is created by man and woman who are sovereign. We create government, and it's important to get that. Whereas many of us are now living in a system where government become almost like this whole separate entity or separate kind of thing which we then rely on like our parent or like our lover or like our big boss to look after us. And in the Holy Bible, in Revelation, it kind of puts it in a way of God versus the beast is another way of doing it, the archetype used. You know, you've got God, and then you've got like the beast or the matrix or system, which ultimately wants to control everyone just as much as God. It wants, as I tell people, it wants to, you know, as my Dr. Bill Facebook page says, it wants to sterilize you, inoculate you, put a collar on you and microchip you just like a dog. So the government or the beast wanted to inoculate you, to control you through, you know, frequencies or through, you know, medicines and getting you dependent on the pharmaceuticals for your health to keep the profits going, to get you dependent upon the, like being tracked with all kinds of various things, various IDs, various things like that. And then eventually to get microchipped. And I don't know if any of you are seeing that now, it's fairly openly being taught. Microchipping, banks and others are coming out now and giving all the benefits of why you should do it and how you means that you'll never have to worry about losing your credit cards. And if you microchip your child and they go missing, you can always get them very easy. There's a whole lot of stuff like that happening now. So we really are in that great divide that we're happening right now. As to those who choose to be what I call sovereign and work with what I call God. And when I say God, I'm not talking about some guy or girl in the sky who sits there, you know, carrying on and creating some religion. I mean, all the major religions that I've studied have really, you know, certain fundamentals are very similar, like very much teaching the higher principles, the higher laws, the reality of higher beings, higher councils at work. And as I told someone the other day, you know, higher beings and higher councils, imagine if you all know that when you're trying to explain concepts to little children, you have to dumb it down and put it in a way they can relate to. So likewise to me, whatever God, beings, higher councils happen to be, you're going to give us archetypes that we can relate to, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Muhammad, whether it's whatever, whether it's something else. So, but ultimately there's higher laws, there's natural laws of liberty, there's natural laws of freedom, there's the natural laws of sovereignty, life, liberty, property, that all the world and all of humanity is governed upon. And man and woman who lives by those laws truly become sovereign, responsible individuals who have the right to be self-autonomous, the right to make laws, and the right to live independently, and really the right to kind of choose and create their own destiny. Those who choose to come under government and live and function under a system and look to those to do must follow the laws of the government. And that's why it says in the Holy Bible, you cannot serve two masters. You know, you either serve God or mammon. In other words, you either serve the higher laws or you serve the beast, you serve the system. So that's when people kind of start complaining about the vaccines, but then they're going ahead and trying to do everything the system asks of them. I'm like, well, you've really got to remember that you've got to be willing to be a sovereign being and create and live your own destiny. So that's the first thing with sovereignty that I wanted to get clear to you. If you can't get that concept, you're really better off not to do that. Throw your lot in with the government and hope it all works out for you, you know. That's the best path for you to go. If you're willing to be sovereign, it requires a level of sacrifice and autonomy and willingness to take responsibility for your decisions that probably goes beyond what many of us have ever imagined possible. And really making decisions that we know are right internally for us on the life, liberty, property, things like that. A good example, which I can give that can relate to many, was when Grace and I separated, for example, and we decided to go through a divorce. There was laws around child support, you know, like coming from this level. But for me, under God, under higher laws, if I had boys, sons, it was my responsibility as a sovereign man to make sure they had a good life and support Grace as much as I could. And I remember, and that's why Grace and I worked so well together. And we had a little brief moment where I think she wasn't sure whether I would do that or not and was going to get the government involved. And I said, and we talked about, I said, look, if you want to do that, that's fine, but I will strictly follow the government laws and no more. You won't get any more, any less. If you want to do this under God or do this together as sovereign beings, I'll do what's right by you. And the truth is, I think you need more than what the government requires from me. And she said that would be great. And that's what we did. And we've worked so well together now. We not only raised our sons together, we work really, really well together in business. We work really well together in running our spiritual work. So that's a good example of where I learned sovereignty, you know, and where I made my own decisions based on what was right. And for example, when it comes to taxes, I pay what I feel is right. You know, there are some taxes or contributions, I'm very happy to give. There's some which I personally, as far as I'm concerned, they're trying to pull a Swifty on me and steal my money. So I'm going to structure myself accordingly. So even the Great Reset, if you think about it, in this matrix, it's really the government saying you will own nothing because we'll own it and we'll make you happy by providing for you, just like you provide for your pets and your kids. So, you know, whenever your pets need food, you give them a cat bowl or a dog bowl and feed them. And we'll do the same for you. You know, you just kind of can get in your car, you can go around, you can get your food, it'll all be delivered for you. We'll treat you well as our pet. You just got to get inoculated and you got to get microchipped and you got to get sterilized and you got to get collared. Whereas if you don't want to be part of that environment, you've really got to make that call and say, I'm going to be here, which means I am going to own stuff and I'm going to use my stuff to help people so that there can be people living in that matrix who won't kind of feel pressured to go and live under that. In other words, a sovereign is a philanthropist. They will actually be always looking how they can use their wealth to help others. That's why I love doing free webinars, to really help people as much as I can. Because I always know that God or universe or higher laws will reward me. And when I do lots of webinars for free, I always notice we get more clients and our business grows a lot more. So the more you're a philanthropist, you start to think, how can I solve the world problem so we don't have to rely on the government and that people will have a choice? Imagine if we'd had a lot of people solving the problems the last 2 years and giving people a legitimate choice other than going to get vaccinated to keep their income coming in to meet their mortgage to provide for their families. Who knows, maybe less people would have done it. So that's how I see the age of the sovereign individual. We're going to be more aware and take more responsibility for each other. So if you really do desire to be sovereign in your own land, keep in mind that the problems of our fellow Australians is not just the government's problems or someone else, and you put them in the too hard basket. It's your problem and it's everyone's problem to fix it. And when you do that, and you take responsibility for your own wealth, you'll be amazed how much, and you follow wise financial principles, you'll be amazed how much your wealth will actually grow. And the wealth matrix works pretty simply as I see it. The 4% wealthy who control the system are actually philanthropists. And this is the thing. I mean, all of these wealthy who've done some pretty naughty little things, many of them, when you also look behind the scenes, are doing a lot of good as well. And so the key is, if you want to break out of this matrix in the middle and be what I call the funders of the system, who fund the welfare, who want to live off you and fund the wealthy, you've actually got to learn to step into that level where you become sovereign. And if you read the Book of Wealth that was written by Bancroft about 120 years ago on the secrets of world wealth about billionaires, he pretty much shows that the secret to billionaires is they play a long game, and they very much operate on a diversified portfolio. And they don't basically go and do crazy speculative crap. They're also philanthropists. They build public infrastructure. They make a difference in the world and the people around it. And you may not be able to go and build an old age home or aged home, care home, or go and build something, but you can start by serving the people where you're at in your community and then go from there. You can find ways to grow wealth and get your own income by finding a business that will really serve people, and then investing your money wisely and watching your wealth grow by just following basic principles of the saving and things like that. So becoming sovereign isn't easy. And my experience is this is about right. Generally around 4 or 5%, like you got the 1% who crack the system, really only about 5% of society, and even that might be quite generous, of people are really actually overall pretty sovereign. People in this level do have levels of sovereignty, like there is a 20% within there that are what I call semi-awake, semi-sovereign. They're sovereign at certain levels. They may be very aware of the whole system. They may have read every conspiracy theory site. They may be totally aware of the Rothschilds and the New World Order. But then they're also very disempowered with their health or their finances or whatever else. So the secret is to really step up yourself. If you're around here, you probably wouldn't be on this webinar. If you're around here or here, if you're around here, you want to be stepping up into here. And if you're around here, you want to be starting to move higher in that circle until eventually you're moving more into that circle. That's the best way to think about it. The other option to be sovereign is become one of the 15% welfare, have absolutely nothing and go broke and just live off people's money. That's what some people choose to do. Not what I recommend that you do, but that is also an option if you really don't want to be in that thing. So the three pillars that Stephen Pettit taught me of being sovereign, who's a mentor for our wealth club, is three main things. One is to have a sovereign mindset. The other one, so what does that mean by when I say a sovereign mindset? What I'm basically saying is really thinking in terms of everything I've just shown you there, where you become a responsible individual. You move out of the blame game. You remove words from your vocabulary, I should do this, or I must do this, or I have to do this, or it's this person should have done this for me, or why don't the government do this? And you become more about a problem solver and about a choice person and making choices. The second thing is to become a sovereign income stream of investments. And what do I mean by that? I just really mean you're starting to find alternate ways of doing things. Like, for example, you may not just go and buy all your gold and silver at the Perth Mint or some mint in Australia. You may also choose to use silver bullion, who we use overseas, and to buy gold and silver to get something sovereign. You may look for other providers as well. You may start looking at things like, ways to develop a business which can actually function and have different ways of getting your money coming in, which basically operate outside the system. It's one reason I was very keen to make sure Global Wealth Club was not licensed and that we're an educator to keep it as sovereign as we possibly could. And very, very importantly, and every wealthy person I've ever known who's sovereign invests a lot of their money in this, is keeping the wealth that you're making. Otherwise, you're going to lose it in a divorce, you're going to lose it in a lawsuit, in a government great reset, in higher taxes that you didn't see coming. So investing a lot of money, time, and energy into making sure your wealth is protected and safe is very, very important. So I'm going to flesh out a little bit more by giving some final thoughts from the day on what I call my 7 key tips to being sovereign in your own land, which to go away and reflect before we have next week's one on robust asset protection. So what's required to be sovereign in Australia? The first one is purpose and destiny. So you have someone who's got real purpose and real destiny, you'll be a lot happier and you'll be more energized. In The Power of the Subconscious Mind, Joseph Murphy says, although you can become rich by doing stuff you don't enjoy, it generally has an effect on your energy, on your overall happiness, and it's very draining. He said, if you can create wealth from doing something that you really like doing and feel is making a difference, you'll feel happier in doing it, you'll be more energized and you'll enjoy it more, you'll feel more that you've earned it, and you'll spend it more with a lot of joy. In fact, a mentor once told me that money and wealth magnifies your happiness one way or the other. If you're a very happy, purpose-driven person, wealth increases your ability to be happy and make a difference. If you're a bit of a misery guts and a bit of a victim, it only enhances your fear because you live in terror that one day some government or some ex-person will take it from you and you just live in constant paranoia. So number one, you want to absolutely get your purpose and destiny first and foremost sorted. Second thing is strong mindset and emotional balance. That's my other second key to sovereignty. I spend a lot of money in mental training and emotional balancing. I still do to this day. I still get regular psychology, psychotherapy, counseling, and work. Why? Because I'm fucked up or messed up? Well, obviously I'm messed up, those of you who know me, but jokes aside, I keep myself in good mental health by actually doing this. I continue to balance myself emotionally. I get a balance between masculine mentors or healers and feminine. I work on developing my feminine intuition. I do stuff like about my eating, about my lifestyle. I make sure I'm going out and having fun. I make sure I'm building good quality connections. I'm getting rid of toxic connections, all that kind of stuff to keep myself in good, healthy, emotional balance and mindset. And that makes it easy to have a clear mind. Alternative energy, food and other sources. I'm doing this in what I think is order of importance, by the way. At the end of the day, you can have all the wealth and assets and everything else. And if you don't have food you can eat and proper energy and a good mindset and a good purpose, you're going to have a pretty miserable life. So you want to make sure you've got all these areas secured. You want to make sure that the wealth that you've got is well protected as well. You really want to structure it, look after it to make sure you've got a nest egg, a cushion, something that gives you a bit of internal stability, knowing you've got some wealth behind you, knowing it's protected. Know that the government, the tax man, the Great Reset, some nasty predator who wants to sue your ass off can get it off you. 5 is being able to legally slash your taxes and make sure you're only giving the government what you actually legally have to and required to do it and what's fair, and not, as Kerry Packer said in 1991 at the print media inquiry, giving unwanted donations to the government to mess around with, pay Scott Morrison and politicians to go out and do all their silly little crap and basically use you as their milking cow. So taxes being legally slashed, building good income streams that are non-system reliant, and we've talked about that, but look, I would say if you're in a job right now where you're not like that, don't run away and leave your job tomorrow necessarily, but start working on other things, you know, like look at maybe getting other contracts outside of that one. Look at finding other ways to get income. Look into it. Go and get a personality test. That's what I did. Find out what you're good at doing. Do something that you know is going to work to your strengths. And finally, a balanced, diversified wealth portfolio. So you really want to make sure that you've got your wealth balanced and things like that, you know. Really, 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 really well balanced. So having a good balanced wealth portfolio, very, very, very important. So this way you can really build a really good sovereignty nest egg and really begin that path of being sovereign. And in fact, what I'm actually going to do here, I've just actually changed it around to really kind of let people see what I think is the correct order of stuff. So that's what I would regard as the right order of how things should look. So from there, any questions now? Questions or comments, your greatest learnings? You notice I'm actually pleased. I've made a decision. I want to aim to do webinars in 45 minutes and not take much longer than that, just because and hopefully that's given you something to think about. So just questions or comments that you may have. Yep, excellent for Joe and Tony. Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Rising Phoenix, you're on the right track. I'm not sure who Rising Phoenix is, but it's a great name. Lisa, how do you find something you love to do? I've been trying to do this all of my life. Yeah, there's a very good book, Lisa, by James Allen called As a Man Thinketh. It's a 22-page book, which you can get for free. As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. I'm just typing it in the chat for you. What James Allen says is, if you don't know what your purpose is, because he says have one, he says do whatever you're doing well till you work it out. But a clue that I could give you, Lisa, is to actually, is to do some kind of personality test or something like that. It gives you a bit of an idea, and just look at the things that you really love doing the most. Like generally, you know what your mission is because it's just something that comes so naturally to you. You don't think twice about it. For me, I always used to say I don't know what my purpose is, but eventually I realized that I always liked doing teaching. I like talking and teaching and solving problems, and that's what basically my purpose became. So, but for now, just doing what you're doing for the best of your ability and finding someone else's purpose that you resonate with to really work with them and serve them while always kind of getting a bit of a sense as to what it could be. So Louise asked, can we watch this again? My husband would like to watch. Yeah, it's going to go on our YouTube channel, Louise, so you'll find it on there over the next day or two. So definitely, and please spread the word, everyone. You know, I really do want to let your friends know about the coming weeks. We really do want to get this word out and help people get sovereign. It's one of my honest beliefs is that we can maybe make a big difference in Australia and minimize the impact of the Great Reset with education, awareness, people being structured. And by and large, I do believe, although there's inevitably going to be some, resetting and some kind of hit, we can minimize that by education, awareness, by action, and by people doing stuff. So thank you, everyone, for your comments and what you've given. Yep, thanks, Christine. It's really great. So in the coming weeks, as I mentioned, next week we'll be covering robust asset protection. The week after that, we'll be covering sovereign income streams and balanced portfolio. The last week, we'll be giving a plan for you to consider, to help you consider. And then after that, we're going to be doing a possible free one on the taxes. We are going to be doing an event in some time in October that's going to be assisting in this area as well, which stay tuned. You'll be hearing more about this event we'll be bringing, around helping you in one of these areas particularly. So thanks, Aidan. Thanks, Joe and Tony. Thanks, everyone. I'll see you all next webinar. Look forward to seeing you all next week. So bye for now.